the sun is dying in Project Hail Mary. And that matters not only scientifically. The sun is the source of life. Without it, there is no agriculture, no food, no energy, and no civilization. In that sense, the sun also becomes a symbol of unity, the thing around which human life itself is organized. So the film is not really just about science. It is also about whether human beings can remain united, or whether they will fall into isolation. That is where Ryland Grace comes in. Grace's own life already mirrors that problem. He is brilliant, but arrogant, and built his identity around a theory that life could exist without water. He wrote about it, defended it, and when others rejected it, he didn't respond with humility. He insulted them, withdrew, and isolated himself. He stopped offering his gifts to others. He stopped living in community and settled, no longer really using his full potential. So from the beginning, the film is already asking a deeply human question. Just as life cannot exist without the sun, can a human being truly live without others? What is interesting is that the film does not treat Grace as a misunderstood genius in the usual Hollywood way. Quite the opposite. He is proven wrong, his theory is tested, and it fails. The mysterious life form they discovered does, in fact, depend on water. Grace had built a whole intellectual identity around something false. And that is one of the film's best ideas. Because it shows something very human. You can be wrong about the very thing you thought defined your life, and your life is not over because of that. Your effort was not meaningless. Your mistakes can still be integrated in your life. Even the years that seem wasted can still prepare you for your real mission, as it happened to Grace. It is only because he studied so much, failed so deeply, and went so far in the wrong direction that he becomes the person the government eventually needs. His error does not destroy his purpose. It becomes part of the road that leads him to it. And yet, when the moment comes, Grace refuses the call. He doesn't want the mission. He is afraid, closed in on himself. But reality imposes itself. Sometimes we are dragged toward a mission we would never choose on our own. And that, too, is part of the film's wisdom. Sometimes our mission doesn't come as a pleasant desire, but as an unavoidable demand. When Grace wakes up on the ship, he finds what he always thought he wanted: complete solitude. And it is unbearable. The other crew members are gone. He is alone. He has no memory, no context, no one to speak to. And the film makes something very clear: human life has no real meaning in total isolation. Even memory becomes important here. Because memory is what unifies a human life. Without memory, we do not know who we are, where we came from, or what our suffering means. Grace wakes up and has to ask the most basic human questions: who am I? Where am I? What am I supposed to do? And that is why solitude is not enough. Human beings need encounter. We need cooperation. We need the other. That becomes fully visible when Rocky appears. He is not just an alien, but a bridge. He comes from another species, another world, another atmosphere, another way of living. At first, the contact seems almost impossible. They are strangers in the deepest possible sense. Even their environments are toxic to one another. And yet, that is exactly what makes the relationship so meaningful. Because the film shows that the other person will often first appear to us as strange, difficult, inconvenient, even incompatible. But that does not mean relationship is impossible. It means that a common language, trust, and common ground must be built. And that is what Grace and Rocky do. They begin with math, with patterns, with necessity. They find a way to communicate because they have a common goal. And that, too, is deeply human. Very often, we begin to understand one another not because it feels easy, but because reality forces us to cooperate. A job forces us. A mission forces us. A crisis forces us. And in that cooperation, friendship becomes possible. The more they work together, the more the film insists on something simple but essential: It is good for different beings, different peoples, different cultures, to meet, exchange, and cooperate. That exchange enriches both sides. Grace brings one kind of knowledge. Rocky brings another. Biology and engineering meet. Curiosity and skill meet. One cannot solve the problem alone. And eventually, this cooperation becomes something even greater than usefulness. And friendship always demands sacrifice. To live in community, to love another person, to be a friend, all of that requires leaving yourself behind. Rocky gives up his own fuel so Grace can survive. In other words, he gives up his time, his security, his way home, for the sake of his friend. And later Grace does the same. When he realizes Rocky will die without help, Grace gives up his own return to Earth. He gives up the home he thought he wanted in order to save his friend. Before a coward unwilling to give his life for others, through friendship and a real encounter with others, he becomes courageous. Not because he suddenly becomes a stereotypical hero, but because love makes courage possible. And that is very different. He does not become brave in theory. He becomes brave when there is someone concrete to love. That is why sacrifice is so central here. The film is not ultimately about intelligence. It is about self-giving. And in a paradox that is almost spiritual, Grace receives life precisely when he gives his life away. He loses Earth, but gains a home. He gives himself for Rocky, and Rocky's world receives him. In the end, Grace, who once feared contact and rejected responsibility, finds meaning in exactly the place he never would have chosen for himself. Even Eva Stratt's faith in him matters here. She forces him into the mission, yes, but she also believes he can become more than he thinks he is. And that is another human truth. Sometimes other people see our potential before we do. The film is also clearly interested in the idea of unity. Not in some shallow, rainbow slogan sense, but in a real one. Human beings need to unite around something greater than themselves if they are going to survive. That is why the international aspect matters. The mission involves cooperation across nations. Scientists keep hope alive on Earth. Human beings need hope, celebration, and common purpose even in the face of extinction. In other words, no one is saved alone. We live by light. We live by friendship. And in the end, we only find life when we are willing to give it away. The sun may be dying in Project Hail Mary, but the film's real lesson is simpler. No one survives alone.